Hey everybody, Larry Lawton here. Do I have a great video for you today? As you can see, I am in green because it's St. Patrick's Day tomorrow. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Westies. The Westies is an Irish gang in New York that work with the mob. And I'm going to talk a little bit about them in prison and on the streets. And about St. Patrick's Day. Before I get started, please guys, check us out on Patreon, YouTube member programs, Discord. Also, we have merch, my book, we have a whole bunch of stuff. And if you haven't subscribed, come on guys, please subscribe. We're working towards that 2 million and it's gonna get there. We're gonna get there. With your help, we get there. And now, why are we talking about that? Why am I in green? Well, because we're gonna talk about the Westies. Now, you're gonna ask, what's the Westies? Now, you ask a lot of people about that and they have no clue what the Westies are or who the Westies are. Now, the Westies is an Irish gang that came about in really in about the 60s, 50s, and 60s. And it was in Hell's Kitchen, New York. Let me explain where Hell's Kitchen, New York is. Hell's Kitchen runs from, I think, about 34th, 35th Street, all the way to 60th Street, 59th, 60th Street, on the west side of Manhattan, which is from about 8th Avenue all the way to the Hudson River. Now that was called Hell's Kitchen. Predominantly working class, Irish, west side, they called it the Westies because it's the west side of Manhattan. But they had a good working class group there, and the Westies were the Irish gang in there that were controlling it. Now, the Westies were a gang. They were run by Mickey Spillane. Mickey Spillane was one of the big guys. I don't know who was before that, even if there was, to be honest. I'm only going all this by memory. Mickey Spillane ran the Westies until Jimmy Coonan. And Jimmy Coonan is in federal prison right now. And Jimmy Coonan was very young when he took over the Westies. And I think it was about, well, he went to jail back in the late 80s sometime. And he was very well known. He's in federal prison right now. Matter of fact, he was in Lewisburg. I think he's in Schuylkill, Pennsylvania right now, which I was in, FCI Schuylkill. I think he's there now. He's in his mid-70s or something like that. He had a 75-year sentence. I remember that. And I think he gets out, though. He has an out date because he didn't have a life sentence. So anyway, getting back to the Westies. So they had their own wars. Now, they did what their mob does, the Italian mob did. Extortion, loan sharking, bookmaking. All of those things were done by the Westies. Well, the Westies are a pretty tough gang. And what I mean by that is they got to be really brutal. They work with the mob. Well, how they work with the mob wanted to get in on Mickey Spillane's action. And the reason the mob wanted to get in on Mickey Spillane's action is because the Jacob Javits Center. The Jacob Javits Center is in Westies territories at Hell's Kitchen. Or it's a little bit south, but that's where it is. And all of that construction and extortion going on in that, and the gambling in at the construction sites, everything that going on. Jacob Javits Center was one of the biggest construction products probably in the United States at the time. It was a massive building. It's not the Pentagon or anything like that, but it's huge and it's a lot of money and it's all union in New York. And you know, the Westies are like anybody else. They like to make money and they had their own gig and you can't knock them for that. And it's like, fuck you, mob. Well, why do we need you? Well, they were pretty violent. The Westies were a legit group. And they never were a strong group. Let me explain that, but what I mean. In the mob, the Italian mob, like the Gambinos were the biggest mob family. I think at one time they had 400, 500 members. I mean, it was a big, big family. And then, obviously, I think the smaller of the families, the Lucchese's or the Genovese's, and they'd have about 100 members, 150 members. And the Bananos were in there, all at about maybe 200, 250 members. The Westies never had, I think, between 30 and 60 members, maybe a little more, but not many more. But they were a violent, rough crew. They used to cut people's hands off. Literally cut them hands off so they didn't know their fingerprints. They've cut heads off. Now, they were doing hits and they were doing muscle work for the mob after Roy Demeo with the Gambinos. Roy Demeo saw an opening when the mob was trying to get in there. He and Mickey Spillane, who was before Jimmy Coonan, didn't want anything to do with the Italian mob. He thought it was his thing, get out of here, go fuck yourself, which was probably a bad move. You needed to align with other people, like any organization, like any country. You call it NATO, call it whatever it is. Well, he didn't want that. Well, he ended up getting pushed out by Jimmy Coonan. And Jimmy Coonan, you know, shot at him. Mickey Spillane moved out of the neighborhood. Now, let me give you that, another auspice why that sucks. Listen, the mob became strong. All the mob. And people ask me all the day, is the mob strong today? Is the Westies strong today? Is the Gambino strong today? They're still there. They're still to be respected or feared or whatever you want to call it. But they're not like they used to be. And let me tell you what I mean by that. The reason the mob came about and the reason the mob became strong is because they were hungry. They were poor. So when you're poor and you want to figure out ways to make money, like me when I was a kid growing up, I had no money. So we wanted to figure out hustles and ways to make money. And we weren't so about following the law. You know, we weren't doing legitimate hustles. We'd do any hustle that made us money. Whether it was gambling, whether it was loan sharking, bookmaking, stealing. I mean, where do you think the 3-card Monte came from? 3-card Monte is a card game you see the hustlers on the street corners making. And believe it or not, they'll make a lot of money. And it's just a sleight of hand game. So anyway, here we are. The mob itself became good because all the old timers, even Right Gotti and all, come up and they were hustlers. They learned how to make money. You know, a lot of the young guys today come from the rich, the rewards from their fathers, the money from their dads and stuff, and they weren't hungry. You know, don't get me wrong, you know, they used to call Michael Francis the Yuppie Don because, you know, he was educated, smart guy, came with the gas scam, went to college, all that kind of stuff. But no, Michael was a hustler too, don't get you wrong. Michael was a street guy as well. And a lot of these guys are not like that today. They want to live off the reputation of their dads and I'm the big shot until the shit goes down and they go fucking yak to the feds. And they don't have that moxie. Because when you come from nothing and you tell me you're going to take it away and I'm going to be back to nothing, I know what that's like. I don't give a fuck. You know, people ask me all the time, Larry, could you get back into it? You know I could mentally. Obviously, physically I could. Meaning I could, but I don't want to. I think I care too much about people now. I mean, I would. I would do so many things because I came from nothing. And when you come from nothing, you then become a person who don't give a fuck. And when you don't give a fuck, you're a dangerous person. When you have the nice Porsche and this and nobody's up your ass, you're going to the Hamptons and you're going to the Jersey Shore and you're living good, you're fucking broads. You don't want to lose that. We worried about money before broads. You know, we worried about that hustle, that game, the robbery game, or whatever game we were playing at the time. So we had that. We had that, I don't know if you would call it that desire to make money and be an earner and get the respect that the older guys got. Because they came up the same way. Whether they had to kill people or whatnot. But they also did things for reasons. They didn't just do things to do them. You know, it's funny, people say, is the mob dangerous today? It's probably more dangerous than it was back in my day. Because these kids don't give a fuck. They want to make a reputation for themselves. So if they're hopped up on some drugs or some stupid shit, and they'll fucking kill somebody. And for no reason. You know, whenever the mob killed someone back in my day, or did somebody, or hurt somebody, whether it was me or not, and when I hurt somebody, it was for a reason. It was never just for fun. I mean, I guess I was a little crazy, but it was never for fun. It was for a reason. And always remember that. That's important. But anyway, the Westies were a tough gang. They had no money. They were in a working class neighborhood. Mickey Spillane leaves the neighborhood. Jimmy Coonan lives in the neighborhood. He's still a hustler. He's a young kid. He's 18 years old, 17, 18 years old. You know, he becomes crazy. Now, this is in the 70s, in the early 70s. And this is when actually Mickey Featherstone, who was one of the enforcers for Jimmy Coonan, who was the boss of the Westies at the time, he ended up becoming the boss, taking over Mickey Spillane. He was a Vietnam guy. So, you know, he was a little crazy in the head, and they had that balls crazy stuff. He came back from Vietnam, and this is about 73, 74, And he was all fucked up in the head. He ends up ratting down the line. I don't know why he ratted to try to get out of problems like they all do. But he was a crazy fuck. And he's the one who would, like, you know, had marksmanship, had training from the military. And he fucking cut people's heads off and cut their hands off. I don't know what he saw in Southeast Asia, you know, in Vietnam to make him all fucked up. But obviously it was something. But he was Jimmy Coonan's right-hand man. So, you know, people ask me about the Westies. The Westies, well, the Westies were in jail too. Now, there weren't many of them. Again, one or two, and a lot of them, you know, you get to know who they were. You'd know who the wise guys were right away. They had the respect of the other people and stuff of that nature. And Jimmy Coonan had that respect, you know, and he was a violent guy who had the balls to do whatever he needed to do to take over. Well, he partnered with Roy Demeo. Roy Demeo was a captain in the Gambinos, and he was a crazy fuck too. They were in Brooklyn, in my area, Brooklyn, a little bit down more Sheepshead Bay. But they were really running one of the biggest car robbery rings in the country at the time. They were robbing cars, which is a big thing. And a lot of the cars back then were being sent overseas in box trucks, getting great dollars, and they'd be literally going to the ports and being driven into the you know, those big carts, and they would stack them in there and send these cars overseas, and they'd be going to you know, all the countries, whether it's Israel and Germany and wherever the frick they were sending them, and they were getting good money for cars. Well, anyway, Roy Demeo's crew was crazy. They were a fucking crazy crew. We didn't know it at that time, but they were cutting bodies up, put them in a bath. You can look them up, Roy Demeo. And they were just fucking crazy. He ends up getting killed too. But anyway, Roy Demeo was smart enough to see that the Westies had a lot of area with a lot of money. And now, you got to remember, back then, New York and Times Square was a scum hole. Yeah, I laugh when I say scum hole. I liked it. And you're really laughing about that because, man, this is crazy. Back in Times Square, back in my day when I grew up in the late 70s and mid 70s even, you know, young 70s, I was a kid. We used to go to Times Square on the train. And Times Square was really bad. You ever see the old seedy movies of Times Square? I mean, they had the sex houses, and they would have the live shows. They'd fucking have people fucking, you know, an animal. Really, it was crazy shit. Times Square was like the seediest part of the country. And it was like, I call it, you know, I liked it. I was a kid, man. What kid doesn't like the crazy shit? And I went in the military at 17 years old, and they even had a USO. USOs were these service organizations that were in big cities and everything. They still got the USO in New York City. And it was for service members, a place to go, get coffee, get soda, get donuts, drop your bags off if you had a sea bag, and you could be in Manhattan and it'd be there. And a place kind of like a safe zone, but because Times Square was, like I said, I mean, you'd see all the sailors down there and the hookers and the sex trades and the shops and the peep shows. I went to my first peep show, you know, where you're putting in the quarters and watching porn in a little fucking booth and you're jacking off. It was fucking, that's what it is. It's peep shows. And then they had the movie theaters. I said, it was crazy. But that's where all the vice comes from. When I say vice, what I mean by vice, vice is where the illegal stuff. The mob owned all that stuff. The mob was very big in that. They in the pornographic and the vending machines and all that stuff that went on down in Times Square. That was all mob control. Don't let anybody get it wrong. That was all mob control. And they made a ton of money down there. And it's like a trade that sex sells. It's just what it is. You can't, it is what it is. Sex sells. So anyway, they were down there as it was, and Roy Demeo and them saw another piece of the action moving west. Now the West had the docks on the Hudson River, but that's not where the money, the Javits Center is where's the money. The Javits Center is one of the biggest convention centers in the country. Probably the biggest convention center in the country. It's in New York. And it's in Manhattan on the west side over there. And it's a mega job. And they were making money, so he saw the in and he partnered with Jimmy Coonan. And him and them, they made an alliance. Out goes Mickey Splain. Now Jimmy Coonan and Featherstone and them, they're doing hits for the mob too. You know, you want an outside agency, you want an outside group to take care of your business, that's who you go to. You go to the Westies. Why wouldn't you go to the Westies? That's a smart move. Nobody's going to know where it comes from. And obviously, even back then, a lot of guys, there was no ratting back in those days. It was what it was. It was a tough time. And I'm sure they were. Now you find out later down the line that Greg Scarpa, they call him the Grim Reaper, he was with the Colombo family. He was a fucking rat for 30 years, like Whitey Bulger. They were fucking working both sides of the coin. Crazy, but that's what it is. I mean, I couldn't live like that. Larry couldn't live like that. I think Larry's word means more than that. But anyway, on this St. Patrick's Day, I wanted to explain what the Westies were, who they were, and where they are today. Now, let me just go to that part of it. Where are the Westies today? You know, they're decimated, pretty much. There's really no hard structure, but there's a few Irish toughies, so to speak. And there's always the guys that want to come up and take over, and where there's a will, there's a way, and where there's money, there will be criminals. Always think of it that way. And now, at their height, the Westies had about 30 people. So at 30 people, 60 people, now maybe what do they got? 30, 20 people? But 20 people could go wreak havoc on one neighborhood. See, the Westies weren't like the mob and like the Gambinos, who had a faction in Boston, had a faction in Jersey, had a faction in Canada. You know, had alliances and factions everywhere. Obviously, New York is where the big thing. And then they had crews everywhere in New York. You had crews in the Bronx and Brooklyn, Queens, and all over New York. Manhattan, you had different times. Harlem and stuff, you had factions everywhere. And they had groups, and each group got bigger and bigger. And that's your power struggles again. And that's why Paul Castellano, living on Staten Island, again, not hungry anymore. Grew up in the Carlo Gambino era, but not hungry. So you got to remember that. When you got hungry people, and there's money to be made, trust me, I will make the money. And that's what I looked at. I was a hungry young guy. So I think that's important to know. Well, anyway, honoring St. Patrick's Day, I want you guys to have a beer, green beer. Why not? If you're legal. You know, St. Patrick's Day, a lot of people don't know this, actually comes from, there was a Patrick in Ireland in the, I think in the 1700s. Well, he died in the 1700s. This was in the 1400s, and he came to Ireland and brought Christianity to Ireland, and they made him a saint. And he died on March 17th, I think 17 something or whatever it was. And that's how they got St. Patrick's Day. And it is totally a big time thing in Ireland. And the Irish that came to America brought it with them, and they celebrated very big. They celebrated in Boston, where there's a big Irish contingency, and they celebrated very big in New York, other places, Chicago, big cities that have an Irish contingency, if you want to call it that. All of those places celebrate St. Patrick's Day. Now, what it's turned into, I don't think you could ask, if you went to a street and you asked 10 Irish guys, what's St. Patrick's Day? Oh yeah, it's party time. You know, green beer, the green rivers, it's just party time. I mean, it's really to celebrate Christianity in Ireland by Patrick, and then he made him St. Patrick, that brought Christianity to Ireland. That's just to give you a little background of St. Patrick's Day for all the other people around the world who have no idea. And believe it or not, I didn't either. So anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoy this video like you do others. Please make good choices and stay out of trouble. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe.